Okay, beloveds, let's come to sit for a moment. Let's come to find comfort and close the eyes. Let the body reside. Let there be a feeling of really succumbing to, surrendering to the here-ness, the now-ness. And then starting to feel both the stillness, but also the dynamic, that Prakriti, Shakti. Maybe the body feels to move or slightly undulate or maybe sway a little. The dance of energy. Simply letting that sway occur. Or whatever movement feels to express itself. Just staying with the eyes closed, but feeling the dynamic. And being with her. It's not that we're trying to make something occur, but we really can be softened into her presence and available to life also in her pulsation. Exploring maybe gentle or more full movements as they come for you. Maybe the body stays fairly still, but you can feel a little undulation through the spine. Really just the dance of life felt now. Allowing there to be breath with this. Integration to the now. Enjoying a couple more breaths here. And then with the next exhale, let's allow the hands to find their settlement into the heart space. And if the body's undulating, maybe coming slowly to a motionlessness. And feeling that inner reverberation, the inner movement of Shakti, the internal field of undulation. Then let's come to chant our beautiful peace mantra. So you can repeat after me. Om Sahana Vavatu. Sahana Bhunaktu. Saha Viriyam Karavavahe Tejasvinha Vaditamastu Mavidvi Shavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Committed in this woman's Sangha, may we be strengthened and nourished and come to great harmony and peace together now in this very moment. Let's enjoy a nice full inhale, stretching all the way up and through and just enjoy that expression of opening. And as you exhale, let the arms come down and just relaxing. Really a feeling of relaxation, especially this evening time gathering, feeling like we can relax and be here together in a relaxed, restful way. Okay, women, so let's come to share, ask questions. in the entirety of our group. So from the videos or the video that you watched, especially around sacred sensuality and sexuality, what's coming up? So what you integrated this last week, what was more of an edge for you, and maybe if there's a question. So let's just allow it to really be an open field. And I know, Shalini, you weren't able to watch it yet. And Julie watched half, but whatever's there. So just really sharing openly. I mean, we're a nice, small, intimate group. So that's my hope, that we can share in that way. So what's there for anyone? Anything?
I'll share.
Yes, Abby.
I really loved I didn't watch the full ending, but I got to the part where you were doing those exercises of breathing. So of the squeezing and then the releasing. And so I've been finding myself doing that just throughout the day, and especially laying down at night. And I love thinking of, the yoni area as releasing like that.
Yes.
It felt nice. I feel I hold a lot there. I'm realizing I'm just tight. So it's to breathe and just relax and just open it up. It's been nice to sort of sit with that and be with that.
Yes. Oh, I love it, Abby. Oh, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing them. Others?
I'll just go along with that. It's the first thing I thought of, the same thing. I just looked at I was writing a bit of notes, but it was the breathing. And I need to work more on that. I hold my breath all the time. I constantly find myself holding. And it's definitely something I try to do in the car, like you said, before bed. And I'm just trying to be more aware of how much I'm holding my breath all the time. And I'm in my stomach and, like you just said, in that area. And I just, I feel like somebody always needs to tell me that, like, relax, like, take a deep breath. And if someone were doing that all day long, I'd be fine. And that's the exact same thing. I thought the same thing, just breathing and breath. And I would love to know more about that. Thank you.
Yes, beautiful. Yes, and it's like, are we open to being breathed? So even that space of the womb and the yoni, like how much it's bearing down also, right? And holding. And so this feeling of expansion that can happen with breath. There are these little a reminder, like there's something called a mind bell, I believe it's called, and it's an app. And so this little bell, or maybe it's meditation bell, it can go off at a timer that you set. So, for example, every hour, and it just gives like a little ding as though it's ringing a gong or ringing a bell. And these can be amazing micro awareness points, because you can use something like that for even the awareness of, bring my attention to the pelvic floor, to the space of the yoni, be breathed, open, feel that bearing down, feel all the circular muscles holding, contracting. And we can see it, we can feel it, right? In our jaws, and how that relates also to the space of the yoni, and then relaxing it out. Taking a breath. So this little bell can even be like these micro awarenesses that can bring a reminder. That can be your little reminder. Who else wants to share?
I will share. Now, I feel a little at a disadvantage because I didn't get to watch the rest of the video from last week, but some life stuff happened unexpectedly, and so that's why. But what I will say is that I've been seeing a pelvic health therapist the last few months because of some issues that I've had. And I think that's part of the reason this course appealed to me. And there's been like an ignoring of the whole area of the yoni. It's like, once I was, done having kids, and it's like, yeah, well, okay, I don't need to pay attention to that anymore. It'll just look after itself, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what's happened. It needs some care and attention.
Yes, Julie. So beautiful. Yes, that recognition. Yeah, and it's almost like our own self-objectification, right? Like, this has a certain purpose, the purpose is done, okay, finished. right? Like not the recognition of all the different marryings of our areas, just like, I spoke of in the Ayurveda immersion that we can have, these different marriages also in a relationship, but also the marrying with ourself, that it has this ongoing unfoldment that can occur. So there may be a phase in our grihastha ashrama, in our householder ashram phase, in which the yoni is a channel of literal birth, of progeny birth, right? Of childbirth. But then also there's other phases of our own inner marrying, our own inner intimacy, which are for other revealings. And, that seat of kama and pleasure, and really recognizing it also in that way and feeling its power and honoring it as well. Yes.
Yeah, that reverence piece, I think, is a big one.
Yes.
Thank you.
Who else wants to share?
I'll share. I'm just kind of drawn a blank a little bit on the exact integrations of last week, but what I did do, like the hair massage actually last night, like making the own hair mask and with the breast massage.
Yes.
From the video, I think what stood out the most was just like this contemplation of, like, from what you were sharing about just kind of connecting with that feeling of impermanence and kind of coming out of your tent and seeing all of these like just everything kind of enhanced. And I've been thinking about that a lot, but also kind of just noticing that when you start to get a little bit desensitized to that, and how if we were somehow always sensitized to that, it would be really difficult to do everything that we do, like what they were sharing about eating the apple. And it's like, if every moment, if you like feel into it so deeply, it feels so intense that it would take you so long to do the 10 things. So I've just been, thinking a little bit of that. And then when you get so away from that feeling, you feel so disconnected. And so, that's that one. And then actually a question, if I can go into that.
Yes, just
From this, I've just been, I don't know if it's just as I'm like paying a little bit more attention to it, or if something in my body is changing, but I've been off of like hormonal birth control for the last year and a half. And now I really feel like especially around like ovulation, just like all the changes that kind of happen in my body. And from what you were talking about a couple of weeks ago with the moon cycle, I noticed I went from ovulating at full moon to now ovulating at new moon in this cycle. And I just wonder if there's anything, I mean, there's a part of me of like, is this a misalignment?
Yes, it's a beautiful question, Jess. Yeah, there are different alignments. So accordingly, if we ovulate with Amavasya or we ovulate with Purnima, it has such a different energy, right? And similarly, then if we menstruate with Amavasya or we menstruate with Purnima, they have very different energies. And let's think about the quality of both and the intentionality of both in our inner cycling. So ovulation obviously is the time when we're most fertile. And the time of menstruation is the time when we release that, because we're obviously not fertilized, right? So it's this release. So in understanding that, if we think of new moon as the empty and release, and full moon as the fullness and really the celebration, then the most aligned cycle to the alignment of, especially external, fertility and release, like really just what we could call almost like the prakruti, the aligned scheduling would be, or rhythming, would be more aligned to that we ovulate on the full moon, that we're full with fertility, that we're full with Purnima, and that we menstruate on the new moon, we release, right? We let go. But when it becomes, and I've seen this for a lot of women, when it becomes a time where we're no longer, or we're not right now, really wanting to bring that fertility into an external form, we might actually switch the rhythm internally. It's like the body is naturally saying, no, 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 now is not the time to be plump during fertility. But we don't really want to give forth of that energy. So we take it in somehow. And then our rhythm might start to switch. And we notice that we start to actually ovulate on the new moon and menstruate on the full moon. And that kind of external, internal is what I've noticed for a lot of women. But really the most aligned to Prakriti, and especially in our fertility years, is that way, which makes sense, right? The ovulation on full and the menstruation on new moon. But for a lot of us, it does shift throughout our lives. And if we do more tracking, we can notice that. Like at times when we're more, just depleted, or where it's a time where our creativity and our fertile energy is more in the inner landscape, we'll notice that the body shifts so that it's not moving towards progeny.
Yeah.
Right, in a very external form. Does that make sense, Jess?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Other sharings? Hi, Shalini. We were just sharing from the video from last week. Were you able to watch the recording?
I have not.
Okay, so we were just sharing if there was questions or things that arose, and so I would really suggest this upcoming week, if you get a chance, because this one, especially around sacred sensuality, centralizing sexuality, is a powerful one, and we can take more time together also for questions again next week. I can see what's there for everyone, but today we'll move forward. Okay, but there's lots of exercises in that as well.
Thank you for the welcome.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it was so odd last week because both Abby and Julie know that in the morning I was using the generator, the power was on, the internet was flowing, and then the power came on for a minute, and then it went kaput again. I don't know what happened. And then we hooked up the generator, and the internet just wouldn't function. So for some reason, the internet on my phone and also in general seemed to go out, and I was staying at the house. I hadn't moved elsewhere like I have been for some of the classes. So I'm so sorry about that. It was at the last minute. And everybody's power was, of course, out. So it was also trying to find a place. It was quite a time to be having consultations and teaching. And so thank you for your understanding also last week.
Tiffany, I do have a question around what was just spoken about with regards to ovulation and menses and cyclical nature.
Yeah.
Now, we know that there's many women around the world who have challenges around ovulation, high estrogen levels, and hormonal balancing.
Yes.
Now, I'm wondering if hormonal acne, doesn't matter at what age, can happen, especially around ovulation. But is it always due to hormones, or is it tied into emotions?
Yes, it's a great question. I mean, acne has so many different as a symptomological expression. It has so many different roots. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, we especially get acne with more pitta and kapha imbalances. But it can be, if it's small blackheads, for example, it can be more vata. And so when we call it hormonal acne, I think this is an important recognition, as you're asking, Shalini, like, is it related to PMS and what might be happening emotionally and stress on that level, or is it just endocrine based? But either way, from an Ayurvedic perspective, we want to look at what the root is of it. So is it a fire pitta, more imbalance that might be happening, or is it more kaphic? And this is when the acne becomes more cystic, and it also becomes almost more pussy and more watery. Pitta acne is more inflammatory, and we tend to see it in more places on the body also. I mean, if kapha gets other bodily acnes, it's again big, more cystic, but we get this kind of rashy acne, the typical acne, which is more a pitta acne, which of course can come for those of us who have more heated both hormones. So let's say when estrogen and progesterone are lowered in the system, testosterone has more space, and that it increases heat in a woman's body. And so that's why we will get that acne around our period, especially. So taking things, for example, like shatavari or evening primrose are excellent, or wild yam, vitex, chaste tree. All of these are very helpful because they're estrogenic. So they help, especially when we have that heating that happens around the period. But it depends on it whether or not it's directly related to our period, like when you asked about hormonally. Otherwise, for a Pitta woman, also just generally being stressed out, having more of this anger, aggression, fiery nature can sometimes manifest itself into also this explosion, inflammation that also comes through the skin. Whereas for a Kapha woman, it's more like we're oozing with water. There's a lot of water. So because of that, the skin can become very clammy, very oily, and become cystic as well. So it's almost like she can be overtly and overly estrogenic. So in that case, we want to have more things like diuretics, things that help to clear and clean the system. So a simple one that a lot of us know about actually is like green tea. It's a good way. It's an astringent as well. Now it has caffeine in it, but it's a simple way. I'm just giving you common, examples that help to clear and cleanse. Nettle, it's a great one that a lot of us know of as well. Nettle is a great cleanser that can be helpful to clean the system of some of that excess weight and holding and water retention. So again, oftentimes in Western medicine, we use these terms like hormonal acne, but from an Ayurvedic standpoint, we really want to see to who and in what condition. So then we really look at the root imbalance of the energetics, whether it's Pitta, it's Kapha, where it's occurring, when it's occurring, why that vikruti, why that imbalance, that heat might be occurring. And it makes sense, especially around the period, because progesterone and estrogen are more cooling. When they start to decrease in the system, a Pitta woman will experience more heat, and that immediately brings more inflammation. And that's why for a Pitta woman, it's also good leading up to the period and around it not to be having spicy food, stressful situations, lots of sun, extreme sour food as well, right? Oily foods, all those things will contribute even more. But if we're not empowered to know that, we don't know, and then we have cravings on top of it, of course, right? Chocolate, all the extremes that happen, caffeine, alcohol. These are some of the worst. And then we want all those things somehow as well, right? Sugar. Does that help? Does it answer your question, Shalini?
It does. Thank you. It just leads me to another one when you just said the sun, is that also in the Western world, which is very confusing, is that a lot of their natural supplements are separated. So magnesium, vitamin C, vitamin D, whereas in Ayurvedic medicine, you don't see that. So there's a confusion as to what's the missing link between the two when we're talking about adding in the right nutrients and minerals during these cyclical portions of our life, especially throughout menstruation and ovulation. I'm ovulating right now, and I am completely bloated. Like yesterday it looked like I had curves, and today it looks like I'm like this. And so I didn't understand what was going on.
Yes.
And, but then I think, so how do we manage and decipher between the two worlds? Because we're in it, right? I have a naturopath as well. And when they say have some vitamin D, I get really confused.
You mean independent of or just receiving it naturally from the sun?
Independent, like a supplement.
Yes, yeah. I mean, in naturopathy, there is more focus on supplementation, and Ayurveda always focuses on how we can not supplement, but actually increase our relationship with nature. So how do we increase our relationship with natural kitchen medicine, foods, for example? How do we receive what's called ahara? And in the 50 hour, we go through this more, so some of you know this, but ahara means the inputs, what we eat, but what we eat through the five senses. How do we connect with nature and receive her fully through the five senses, digest her fully through the five senses? So for example, sun is a much better, much more absorbable form of vitamin D. But when we live in Canada in the winter, vitamin D supplementation is helpful. Of course it's helpful, there is a degree to which that is helpful. But all of these external supplements can never supplement away the benefit of the direct relationship with nature. So as much as we can, bringing sattva, bringing balance, bringing harmony, bringing the natural qualities through the five senses. So as much time as we can possibly spend. And then if we need to do our best, we supplement. But that's why Ayurveda doesn't offer, formulas, traditional formulas that we always take, that we always supplement with. Now, there's a lot of kitchen medicine things that we could say we always take. For example, haldi doodh, right? Like taking turmeric milk. It's a very simple example, right? Do we call that a supplement? No, we would just call that part of life, right? That you have golden milk or turmeric milk before bed, or, chewing on fennel seeds. I mean, is that a supplement? No, not really, right? So having mouth freshener, as it's often called. But these are all natural ways that we're always integrated that are Ayurvedic, actually. And we've lost many of those. So it's not that the supplementation is right or wrong. It's just really being considerate in a holism of whether or not we're also doing our best to reintegrate ourselves with Shakti, as much being with Prakriti as much as possible. And then we see what's also needed to supplement. Does that help, Shalini? Is that at all?
It does. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions and sharings from last week's video, especially? Okay, Shalini?
I just have a comment, like what I observed, and a question. I've been just staring at the picture just at the back of your frame. It reflects, like, to me, Ardhanarishwar, like I'm just reflecting a lot on like my physical body, like my right versus left, and like I got the septum done just so, like, it was a very weird thing. I went to the store, I'm like, hey, I just need a septum to just recognize how I feel within my own mirroring of inner self, because I was like very detached, because recognizing that I have part of masculine and part of feminine within me. I wasn't accepting the masculine part of myself. I was like always very disappointed. I'm like, why do I do yoga and feel so different on the right side, and I feel very different on the left? And like I recognized for a couple of months I've been experiencing like pain around my left like ovary, or like just around that, and I'm not experiencing anything around the right. So I'm like now linking up all these things with like this whole concept of, okay, yes, it's a so inner mirroring, and like I look at myself in the mirror like continuously, and I'm like, okay, yeah, it does bring a lot of emotions and the surfaces that I was just like pushing them away.
Yes.
I don't know, is it something that every woman who menstruate recognizes, that there is like right part being heavier and to the left, or is it just something that I am recognizing in my own body?
Yes, I think you're recognizing this more in your own body, Shalini, but I think it's a beautiful welcoming for everyone to be more aware of, like if we can feel that hatha relationship with ovulation versus menstruation during the different cycles of the moon, where we live in more. And I love this inner marrying, like even in the symbology, like we've been talking about beautification and the various rituals, right, as women. And so there's something about even the symbology of that, the marrying of both nostrils, right? And the marrying of Ida and Pingala. So, just really this marriage between the two. Like when I first got my nose pierced, it was really clearly, I wanted it pierced for Ida because I have so much solarization in my being. So this solar energy was always more heightened. So I decided, here to heighten and to bring some of the balance to the Ida energy, to bring the balance. But I love this inner marrying. And I think it's a really powerful noticing, Shalini, to see like, okay, when do I move more to the yang or the yin, the ha or the ta energy? And really like hatha offers us to come back to our center point as well. And you've just had also the external expression of that by getting married also. So Narishwara, you just had, this coming together in that expression, two as one. So all of this seems to be a deep contemplation for you right now. Beautiful. Okay, lovely. So I would really suggest, if you haven't connected with that full video, go back, because it's one of the juiciest and most important also of our weeks together. And then next week I'll ask again if there's further questions that are arising or anything that's coming up around that, and really try to practice some of the exercises as well, okay? And some of the things that are offered, both the purification and, I talk also about steaming, about the eggs. So there's lots of things in that video, lots and lots of things that we can come to. So for this week, let's look a little bit more at what we call women's life cycle. So we're going to look a little bit more at the natural cycling and the cyclical changes of our female embodiment and the phasing that happens for us as women throughout our lives. And you might find that this is helpful in your recognition of where you are in this life cycle, but also helpful for the various Sangha sisterhood, both of the women who are younger than you. So whether those are daughters or, children, or those are women around you, younger women around you, and also for those who are more in their sagehood, also in that period of life, and just really understanding this whole beautiful women's life cycle. The Vedic tradition has one way of seeing it and connecting to it and recognizing it, but almost every indigenous tradition has this recognition, both for women and for men, the rites, the passages, the various phases of the life cycle that one goes through. So this is a beautiful exploration. So what are the three phases? And today in the Ayurveda immersion, we were going through this numerology also of 3, looking a little bit at 3. Do you remember that, Julie and Abby? So we were especially, exploring this. And some of the others of you, Jess and also Shalini, you've been in this course before as well. But these 3 phases, so in Ayurveda, we have the recognition that the life ages can be parceled into 3 phases of life. So childhood, what we might call our childhood, our middle, our adulthood, and then our elderhood or our sagehood, these 3 phases of life. And they correspond to the energies of Kapha, Pitta, and Vata. So to return to, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page of the basics around these 3 doshas. So Kapha is made of what elements? Just so we're all really clear. So what are the elements of Kapha?
Earth and water.
Earth and water. Okay, so a Kapha being has more earth and water in their physiology, it expresses itself, but also in their emotionality and also in their psychology as well, right? So they're grounded in body, but tend to be grounded, patient, stable, also in mind as well. Other qualities, but more Kapha, okay? And Pitta is what elements? Someone else besides Jess. Someone different between each one of them. So what's Pitta? Just to clarify that we've all had some.
Fire and water.
Okay, so fire and water. So especially this expression of fire through Pitta. So we can see the specificity of that, again, in the physiology, in the emotionality, and also in one's mentality. And Vata, what are the qualities or what are the elements?
Air and ether.
Air and ether, beautiful. So again, a very different expression. Enthusiasm, spaciousness, both in body, but also in emotionality and in mentality or in psychology. So these 3 doshas, as we will come to more and more, and this is more also for the Ayurveda immersion, but we all have what is called a prakriti. We all have our original constitution, our blueprint constitution, in the way in which 1 or 2 or all 3 of these doshas are predominant in our being, and that's our unique framework. That's our unique constitution for life. It doesn't change. What does change is that our current state can either be in correspondence with that, or one of the doshas, one of the elements, can be out of balance, and therefore we don't really feel like we're in our natural state. But what does happen, according to Ayurveda, is no matter what your prakriti is, no matter what your constitution is, all beings go through these 3 phases of life. And as women, we will go through these phases in their correspondence with the doshic energy. And what I mean by that is, even if you're a woman with more fire, you're a woman who's more pitta, in your childhood years, all women are in their kapha phase. All beings are, but as women, we're also in our kapha phase of life. So even if I'm a pitta woman, this will be the most kapha phase of my life. And we're going to look at what that means for us in the development of our womanhood. And I feel this is very, very helpful for us to understand how we treat young girls, how we work with girls, how we work with us as women in our adulthood, and also how we treat that phase of life as we move into sagehood or our older years, our aging years. So these 3 doshas also correspond to the 3 phases of our life cycle, along with the 3, what we might call the Murti, or the 3 Devis, or the 3 Devas rather. So Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And we went over this today as well in the 50 hour. So Brahma is the energy of creation. Vishnu is the energy of what? What's Vishnu the energy of?
Maintenance.
Yes, maintenance, sustenance, preservation. And Shiva is the energy of? Who knows this one? Shalini and Shalini are like, shall we answer? Shall we answer? Shiva is destruction. Yes. Who said it? Abby?
Destroyer. It was Shalini.
Shalini, yes. So the destroyer, this destruction energy. And similarly, these relate to these 3 phases. So the earliest phase of our life is more about creation. The mid phase of our life is more about sustenance, maintenance, preservation. And the later phase of our life is more about the falling away, to be very honest, right? The destruction of, the letting go, the impermanence that occurs. So these 3 phases also correspond to these 3 God forms, to these 3 energetics. But they also relate to 3 Shaktis, to 3 Devis. And the 3 Shaktis are Kriya, Jnana, and Icha Shakti. How many of you are familiar with these words? Have you heard these before? Yes? So Kriya Shakti is the Shakti energy of what? Does anyone have an idea? Sometimes we translate Kriya as purification, but there's another way we translate it also. It's the action orientation of Shakti, so her capacity to act in the world. So especially in our childhood, it's about action. It's about tasting things, being in the sandbox, trying everything out. We're in that action orientation, right? Jnana means what? To know. I see some of you saying it. So to know. So this is the Shakti, the feminine energy, the goddess energy of knowing things. Now I start to know the world around me and within me, and I start to explore, be in a great exploration. And this is again that energy of sustenance. Like, how do I sustain my life? How do I live in the world? This is Jnana Shakti. And then lastly, we come to Icha Shakti. And what's Icha Shakti? This is the Shakti of will. So now we take the action and we take all the knowing, and we also bring it into enacting, or we bring it into a will. It's like we marry it with will also. What's the will for? You know, divine will and my own will. And how do we take that will from the action and also from the knowing and then bring it into something, right? So like we've been talking about voice and vision and vividness. How does it then pour? And these 3 marrying Shaktis are so important, that all 3 of these are enlivened, and all of us, men and women included, but especially as women in our connection to Shakti or Prakriti, that we really have the balance of all 3 of these, and that throughout our life we learn these 3. Like we're marinating in her, we're deepening in her as well. We can feel the will of goddess, you know, the will of goddess in the later years of our life. We've been informed by what it is to act in this world, what it is to know about ourselves in this world and existence, and then also to feel the great will, to feel that we're an instrument. This is Icha Shakti as well.
So Tiffany, would each of the Shaktis be an extension of a goddess?
Yes, I imagine that they probably are related, Shalini, but you know, I don't know the specific devata that connects to each one of them. And it's an interesting exploration. Maybe we look that up and see, okay, because I imagine that there are vidyas that are connected to them.
Well, when you said, now which Shakti was it that was the to know? Was that the creator? Jnana. So that to me would be, perhaps, I'm just assuming here, maybe knowledge. So that could be Saraswati.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but yes, it's an interesting one. Any other wonderings? Anyone else? Or anyone have any experience of knowing this? I'm just looking it up if there's anything I find here. Yes, I'm just looking. I mean, there's often the three goddesses that are thought of as this Mula Prakriti, so or Adi Parashakti, right? So when you're asking this also, Shalini, like we have this combination of the three primary, right, which is Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. So these three coming together. So maybe they would relate, like Saraswati, you know, maybe is more the knowing. Lakshmi might have more of this action, and Parvati maybe more of the will, you know, but this triadic nature of the root Shaktis.
Which actually makes sense, because if we look above to what you were sharing before with Vishnu, Shivji, and Brahma, those are their consorts.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So those of you who aren't familiar with this, when we talk about, I'm just going to put it in the chat for you, okay? So when we talk about what we might call Mula Prakriti, like the root nature, the root, and sometimes we call these the Adi Shaktis as well. And they're triadic in nature. So there's this triad in Shaktism, especially of Lakshmi and of Saraswati and of Parvati. Exactly, the Trimurti. So it's beautiful to see, yes, exactly, because of the consorting. You see, oftentimes in monotheistic backgrounds, when we have, you know, the singular God kind of background, when we see these kind of pantheonic traditions that have much, you know, much more diversity and all of these personifications of gods and goddesses, and it can become confusing to a conditioned religious mind. Just like I thought there was one God, he had like a beard and stuff, and he was like somewhere in the sky, and he's a man. And that's how it goes, right? That one was already difficult to believe in. So now you're asking me to believe in some monkey that flies with it. And then this like elephant plus like some kind of Buddha baby body. And then you've also got like, what is all this?
You know, the beauty of this is also is I look at it as a hierarchy sometimes, because I don't know. Hinduism is so deep and so vast. I don't even know all of it.
Yes.
But there is the beauty in this, in the Trimurti, is the reincarnation.
Yes.
And that is something I'm still learning. It's vast, you know. So yeah, it's beautiful.
Yes, so beautiful, Shalini. And so around this, all of these various forms that we see, and they're somewhat personified, of course, in these beautiful, almost mythological lookings, but more subtle, you know, appearances, because we think, okay, I can't combine, you know, man and monkey, but all of them, just so we're aware of this, yes, in the subtler realms, in the subtler lokas, in the subtler existences, they are said to exist in these forms. But beyond that, the recognition is also that all of these personifications are actually just creating iconography, personifying that which is purely invoked energy and that lives within us. So we're able to bring much more relationship between an imagery. So for example, when you see this goddess behind me, it's much different than saying meditate upon the blue one, you know, or there's this energy of ethereal blue, fierce feminine that exists, right? So when we bring it into personification, then we can create this relationship of bhakti. And we will have more exploration of this in our last session together for this first course, because this creates the merging. This creates the sense of intimacy, of lovemaking with the goddess, of awakening her and welcoming her, or him, right? Whatever energy it might be. So this personification is really about recognizing qualities that live within us, qualities that exist within us. As Shalini is saying, symbolism around statues and visuals helps us as humans focus and concentrate on specific energies. Exactly. Because without that, it remains a little bit too subtle for a lot of us in our human form. Right. So similarly, when we talk about all these different gods and goddesses and Trimurti and all, recognize these as aspects of yourself. It's a recognition of that which lives here within ourselves, a remembrance of that which lives here. And so the Vedic tradition has done a beautiful, offered a beautiful way for us to really bring relationship with that, to bring intimacy with that. Okay, let's continue, and then we'll take a little break. So there are these three phases, and we're going to go through them together. So childhood, which we might think of as our maidenhood, and then adulthood, which we might think of also as the area of motherhood, even if we don't have children necessarily of our own, and elderhood, which we might think also of sagehood. So we're going to look through these and look at what energies are there, potential imbalances that can come, and how we can balance in each one of those phases. So after we come back from our break, that's what we're going to focus on, okay, for the rest of our time. Let's take just a quick 5-minute break. So we'll come back at 5 minutes too. Okay, does that work for everyone? Yes, or 6 or 4 minutes too. So you get a true 5-minute break. Okay, enjoy your break. We'll see each other in a few minutes. Okay, let's jump right into it. So what I love in this recognition from Ayurveda is that it really comes to really give an honoring to each one of these phases of life and the unique energy that's there in each phase of the life, and also to really give reverence to these being intentional phases that we go through, and the kind of transformative and alchemic rites that we go through as beings in these various phases, and to really give the deepest honoring to each phase. And today I would say, without, just like, we've lost some of the recognition of dinacharya, of our daily routine and our daily clock and our daily rhythming and our seasonal rhythming, we've also lost the honoring of these different phases also of the life. So for example, young women are asked to be adults way too quickly, for example, right? The purity, the innocence, the gentleness, the creativity, the mistakes, the exploration, all of the things that we can engage in as in that phase of maidenhood and childhood. It's hurried. There's a hurried energy around it. And then similarly, and I often speak to this one, there's a real lack of honoring, especially in Western cultures, and it continues to globalize its way out somehow, this dishonoring of the elder phase. So it used to be that there was such an honoring of this phase, especially in the honoring also of intergenerationality, intergenerational fields, homes, communities, women sitting together also in intergenerationality, that we would really look to our mentors and our elders as sages to teach and to learn from, right? So whether they're our grandmothers or our mothers or our great-grandmothers, or just elder women mentors in the community. And instead, now we do everything to deny aging. So we deny that phase of life as well. We're like disgraceful when it comes to that. There's not a grace of movement into that aging and loving that phase also, honoring that phase for ourselves and for others. So that opposition to it means that most of our cultural fabric and conditioning tells us that we should mostly live in this mid phase of our lives, both in our childhood and our later years. And that has something to say, because this mid phase is the pitta phase. So it's saying, we should all be kind of fiery, directive, active, right? Anti-aging movement, even with exactly surgeries, makeup, Botox, all of it, all the things we want to do to deny the fact that age is, and impermanence is expressing herself, right? I'm not saying, again, we had this exploration of beautification and the rites and rituals that we may want to do in our hair masks and our face masks and all the things, right? And our kajal and, all the things that might be there. But nevertheless, there's something, and you see 70, 80-year-old women, beautiful women throughout the world who still enjoy, putting makeup, but still this recognition of the beauty of aging, of course. So this focus on the pitta phase tells us something about what is focused upon: success, activity, doership, and what kind of worlds we're creating when we only honor that phase of life. And we try to permeate that phase into the earlier years and into the later years. So you see, the importance of us sitting together today is this. Because if the six of us sit with this, if the six of us contemplate this, if the six of us really find, and those of you also coming on video, I should say as well. So all of us together as women, as a community, a Sangha, really again, reassert the importance of honoring these phases. This has echoes, this has impact and implication. For the men in our lives also, that they also honor it, for the young boys in our lives, for the elderly men also. So it's for everyone, it's for all human beings, but also the power of Shakti in each one of these phases and how much it's necessary that she have these three phases. So let's go through them together. And in our going through them, it's really like an honoring, a great honoring, and seeing how Ayurveda and Tantra sees them. So this first phase, as we discussed before, is the childhood phase or the maidenhood phase. And this is the phase of great Brahmana, of what we call nourishment. So this is the phase of birth until menarche. So until the onset of our period, really. But sometimes this phase is widened a bit till more like 20, so after menarche, but that phase also of our teenagehood and, 20, even 25, where we can still have some of this phase of kapha. Because now with everything that we're subjected to, hormones in the food that we eat, et cetera, stress, a lot of young women are having menarche, are having their period way younger. Right? So it's the onset might be coming at 10 or 11. We're having this pre-developmental occurrence that's happening. And would that be the end of our kapha phase? Absolutely not. So we could say 20, 25, until that entire phase, this is the kapha predominant time. This is supposed to be a time that has the qualities of being more heavy and slow and cool and oily and smooth, dense and soft and stable, and more gross, the vital. And the energy of Brahma, that everything is coming into growth and creation. Everything, the creation of our world really is happening in these earliest years. How we create this embodiment that we're going to live in for the rest of our lives, how we create the foundation of our emotional field and how we regulate it and we work with it, our mentality, the thoughts, imagery, conditionings, habituations that are implanted or what we connect with. And this can be everything from the sports and athletics and hobbies that we engage with, the groups and the sanghas that young women are connecting to, the education, the family, the circle that they're surrounded by. You see, this is all the Brahma energy, all the creative kapha energy. What is she nourished by? What's dense in her structure? What's brought into groundedness in her structure? So some of you, are mamas of girls and you're going like, oh, I haven't done this right thus far. Don't, just back up for a moment. It's okay. Like we're all doing our absolute best. But also we're currently surrounded by a collective field that asks young girls, again, to be way too old, way too quickly. And not to just enjoy this, again, slow, cool, smooth, dense period. To have more density, to feel more calm and stabilized at home, not to be going all over the place here and there and super active all the time. Of course, we have this active energy, trying things out, but not to be scattered in our lives. There's something about building secure attachment and stability that's so important during childhood, during our maidenhood. This makes for the ripening of great women. So for any of the young women in our lives and young men in our lives, because they will be the ones mirroring and bringing also a reverence to young women, this is really important. That all young people really have an honoring of this phase and that we honor this phase for them as well. And we contribute to it, that we contribute to this growth phase, to this kapha phase, that we supply them with enriching nourishment in whatever ways are needed. And I see this, with the beautiful young ones in my life. Like I have some godchildren and, nieces, nephews, and really the way in which, they're just yearning for that saturation, right? Yearning to be saturated. Like there really is this density of what more can, again, it's that Kriya Shakti, right? So the Kriya Shakti, gaining all the faculties and the physical capacity to act and discovering the power of action. All the ways in which they can play with Shakti, they can play with the world and come into action. And so when do we, as adults, rob this of the young ones, of the young beings? And I think this is a really important one. Yeah, exactly. Shalini's saying curiosity, like why, but why, but why, but why, but why? You know, why my one nephew, everything possible when we do it, you know, this or that. I mean, I call him my nephew, but not by blood. And he says, ¿Qué pasó? ¿Qué pasó? ¿Por qué? ¿Qué pasó? It's just constantly, you know, like, why? What happened? What happened? Why? And we're all like, oh my God, you know, everything, all the time. He wants to know all the time. And it's beautiful, right? Like, why? Well, what happened? Well, why? Is this beautiful open availability to be nourished deeply by action and orientation and a deep understanding and creativity. And you know, the way in which the brain is developing at this age is so beautiful to know more about, like the capacity for just language, for example, motor skills, the way in which we develop at such a rapidity. The creative energy is so full and vast and just really, really dense at this time. So for women specifically, this is so important that we honor this phase, because when there's a robbery of this phase, then what do we get? We get young women who have not had that kind of stable, dense, calm, solidified, safe, secure, and creative energy. And often women who are feeling empty in some way. When we have a really nourished maidenhood, we feel very full unto ourselves. And that makes for beings who make very different choices in our adulthood, right? When we move from emptiness, we're looking to fill that emptiness. But when this is a good kapha phase and we feel deeply full, then we move into the later years of our life, the middle years of our life, very differently. And we can all reflect on this, different ways in which we didn't really receive the full nourishment, the full creative energy that we could have received during this time. Each one of us has our own thing, right? And it's not about demonizing the job our parents did. They, again, in the lineage of beings, did the best that they possibly could. But this is also about us stepping into a new world. You know, Ayurveda now is really empowering us to recognize, okay, what's the impact and the implications of this now more than ever? What can we do? How can we do it better? How can we really bring importance to this now? One thing that I often have the utmost respect and I offer, you know, I really touch my mom's feet, I have to say, was she was only 20 years old when she had me. And one of the most impactful things of the way in which she engaged in the relational field with me was her availability to anything. There was no idea of where I needed to arrive to or what needed to happen with my beingness. There was just this wide open availability, which I would say was also because of her age. She wasn't so stuck in knowership, right? Like you have to be this or you have to do that, or it's like this or it's like that. And this provided such a field of openness and such a field of acceptance that I could be creative and grow and come to her and say, I'm going to do this now. Now I'm going to try this. And what about this? And she'd say, okay, let's do it. Okay, let's do that also. Right. So all these ways, and she would just meet it in any given moment. But many of us, because either we're tired or, you know, there's various ways in which we could guilt ourselves about not being, you know, excellent at this. She had her own limitations as well, of course, also being 20. But that kind of field of open engagement of the child, how often do we really offer that for their creativity to be the guidance? So this beautiful movement around the world, I don't know if you've heard of it, of unlearning. Have any of you heard of unlearning? So, you know, really letting go of and letting it be child-led, you know, what the child wants to learn in an everyday structure. Like you don't have to be in an educational structure to be learning and infused with an understanding of existence. So I have quite a few friends and a small community that I know also in India, that they're this unlearning community. So they just let the children be with them throughout the day and guide what it is that they want to be infused by in their lives. I mean, it's quite powerful. Right? Then we have alternative schools like Steiner and Waldorf and Montessori and all these other schools, which really highlight, again, this child-centered asking, requesting for the creativity. This is true maidenhood. And this really empowers that Kriya Shakti, great players on this planet. It allows for that vividness to be known. It allows for a woman to also develop at a young age her voice and her vision. So what are some of the potential imbalances, though, that can come during a girl's childhood? Because it's the kapha energy, she can have, especially during this time, excess mucus, excess weight gain, and early onset of menarche. And especially if it's a kapha young girl. So if you're kapha already in your constitution, and then it's the childhood phase of life, this can be when a young woman has more of the challenges in her life. She might say, you know, I was kind of chubby as a young girl. I had a lot of bronchial things or things were coming up, but then I kind of grew out of it. Actually, it got better. I had more sadness and things that happened, more emotionality during that phase, but then I kind of grew out of it, you know, but these are potential imbalances that can come, especially for young women. And mentally, attachment and sentimentality, sadness, depression, sluggishness, and dullness, especially in the kapha phase. This is what can happen, and especially around puberty, right? Did any of you experience any of these kinds of things coming up around puberty? These can be some of the kapha-like states that happen, especially mentally, what can be there for some young women. And then Ayurveda offers us what are some of the most beautiful ways that we can balance health during a girl's childhood. So always in Ayurveda, we come to, and some of you already know this, but we come to 3 chikitsas. So the 3 chikitsa are 3 modes of medicine or 3 treatments. And these 3 chikitsas are hara, vihara, and aushadhi, which means diet, lifestyle, and also herbal medicine. So whenever we're offering the treatment to anything, or the prevention to anything, we lean into the treatment of using diet, lifestyle, and also some herbal medicine. So if a young girl is experiencing some of these things, there are some specific ways we can maintain balance. And even if she's not experiencing those, especially during childhood, in that it's a more kapha phase of life for all young beings, but also for women, what are especially the ahara and vihara? Giving aushadhi is more specific. Giving herbal medicines is more specific, you know, and usually requires working with an Ayurvedic practitioner or a doctor. But diet and lifestyle are easier ways that we can really all orient. So during a girl's childhood, having very simple, nourishing, whole, fresh, balanced food that's regular and constant. Think about this. How many young people really have regular, constant meals today? Just that is very kapha aligned, right? So a lot of young people no longer have this. We're up and down and we eat totally different things all the time. And right, we have all different flavors. Our digestion is subjected to different things. Again, if you're parents, if you're mamas, this isn't about guilting yourself. It's just something cultural also for us to recognize. You know, if you think 30, even 40 years ago, we had pretty much the same meals every single day. This is how it would go for a lot of people, right? There was kind of a meat and potato and grain or something like that that would happen. Now things are all over the place, and also the timings. You know, little Johnny's got whatever, swimming and then soccer, and then he's got this club and that, and everybody's trying. But regular and constant is really important with everything during the creative phase, during the childhood phase, that we really establish the Ayurvedic clock, that we get really established in this routining. Because if that gets established, it again carries through for a healthful adulthood and later for a healthful longevity as well. So this is so, so important. And deep care of one's what we call jataragni. So deep care of one's digestion. And how do we care of one's digestion? Eating properly in general, but there are so many things we offer in Ayurveda, from not eating processed foods to eating in moderation, not eating or having snacks constantly in between every meal. I mean, young kids are often given this idea that they need to be snacking all the time, but actually their digestion also needs sometimes a break. And if they're given proper moderate meals, then they can also have snack times, proper snack times. And I know many of you know this as well. But what I see today is that a lot of kids are taught at an early age this kind of grazing. And then their digestion is impaired because they're constantly grazing all the time. They, of course, need more input. It's the kapha energy, but they also need little periods where the digestion is just also without anything, a little bit of warm water, really nothing more than that. We've lost so many of these simple things that help for healthful patterns as children. But I remember in Canada, for example, they started in schools when I was young, this breakfast club. because many of us at that age were starting to go to school without eating in the mornings. This was beginning, right? Many kids would go. So they started these breakfast clubs in schools. Have you heard of these before or seen them? So in elementary schools, where kids who went to school without breakfast could go and grab a granola bar or fruit or something, because of course they see the correspondence between what? Learning, creativity, nourishment, and eating. Of course they have a relationship, absolutely. And then of course, with the increase of internet and late nights for kids and all the things that are happening, many teenagers especially are not having this really nourished creative phase. And so they go to bed too late, they get up too late, they don't eat a proper breakfast. Our scheduling is so askewed today, right? So this is something really, especially for us as moms or aunts or caretakers, to be really considerate around right into that phase of 20. Just yesterday, I was speaking with my partner's son, and he's 20, and just some of the things that are occurring, you know, because they've developed during teenage years. And it's amazing to hear the challenges that occur, especially, you know, he was sharing with me for late teens around sleep insomnia because of social media and internet usage. And right, we're using all of these screens before we go to bed. And then sharing with me also what happens with the majority of his friends. They don't have their main meal, or they don't have their breakfast really until 11 or 12. They sleep in, or they kind of, you know, make their way tired off to classes, university classes. We're establishing some really impairing, some deeply impairing propensities and ways of living, especially in our youth today. So all of these kinds of things turn back the clock. They return to these more established ways of Ayurveda that really offered having these nourishing sleep, rest, deep nourishment also in our food, taking care of our daily routine. And this is so necessary in the childhood phase. So share with me, is there any questions that come up for any of you about this phase, about childhood, about the challenges that can arise, the ways in which we might work with them, anything that's there for you?
I'm just wondering, I mean, it's really cool to learn about this in the context of kind of childhood and kind of relating some of the like kapha dosha and what things might be needed at that time. And so what's kind of like, how early in age would you start with things like nausea oil or something like that, or doing like some practices to balance it? Is there?
Yes, it's a nice question, Jess. So Jess was asking about nasya, like using this nasal oiling. So I think it's really sweet, Jess, already to have children involved in generally how they wake up, like with a morning prayer, waking up at the earlier, you know, morning time. But of course, children need sleep as well. So they may not wake up as you would, you know, at the same time you and I, but really learning this. What it looks like to wake up in the freshness of the day, to wake up in Brahma Muhurta. All of these things are really nurtured, right? And so the osmosis that happens, and then starting with scraping the tongue and working with all of these things. So children, absolutely, around 4 or 5, even doing this, we have a beautiful little video of the same little boy I was telling you about that says, ¿Qué pasó? ¿Por qué? Doing nasya. So his dad puts a drop on his hand every morning, and he's 4, and he sticks his pinky, and then he puts a little bit of oil, you know, in each nostril, and then he goes, you know, and sniffs it in and off to school, right? So this is what he's learned. And he's like, okay, I'm good. You know, I did my nasya for the day. And these kinds of rituals, because when we give ritual in a kapha setting, so in the kapha phase of life, it sticks, it's sticky. Pichila, right? So pichila is the quality of stickiness, right? Pichila. So what this does is when we really set up ritualization in the early years of our kapha energy, it can really stick for life. And this is such an important one, because a lot of us are struggling now to go like, I really see the benefit of these things, but God, I didn't grow up with them, right? Or I didn't have some of these rituals. And some of you did. You had other rituals, or however it might be. So really establishing these healthful rituals early on, they can really stick easily. And I've even had, I have a few Southeast Asian and Indian patients who come to me and they say, I remember the energy of how it would be in the home with my parents and these rituals. I want to return to that. I feel the nourishment of that, but it's been somehow learned out of me. I ended up working in corporate world or whatever it might be, and I lost my way. But I notice when we return to it, they have a primary nourishment, like an early on remembrance, a body memory of it. A lot of us may not have that. We may have had other things. For example, I remember my grandmother with the rosary. So we would have the rosary, and some of you have, more of a Catholic background as well. And so prayer before bed and in the mornings and going to mass with her as well. And I remember the ritualized feel of that, the taste of that also. And that stays with that. It sticks in the kapha energy of childhood. It informs something deeply. It finds its own density in our being. So when Jess asked these questions, of course, we're not doing a full Nasya, 2, 3 drops, 5 drops. What we might do, a little bit of this, inner oiling, or just a simple sesame oil, a little bit of sesame oil also into the ears, right? Considering Abhyanga, for example, some of you have taken with me fertility courses or where we've talked about that in preconception and post-conception as well. And the postnatal period, both mama and baby, full Abhyanga is given to them every single day. The baby is given Abhyanga every day. What kind of kapha does that create, right? So if a baby right after they're born is doused, is just continuously cocooned in warm oil, imagine that baby is not a Vata baby. That baby is going to feel so nourished, so held. Imagine getting a massage for every day for the first 40 days of your life. You're like, life is amazing out here. These are the kinds of things we've lost again. Postnatally, women, and I just share this with all of you, those first phases of our childhood, the earliest phases, according to Ayurveda, those first 40, 48 days, mama and baby don't leave the cocoon, the nest of the home, and even really the room. So there's a specific area of the house and then the home. And if there is a container, a parameter of a yard, etc., the woman doesn't leave from there. She's really staying there with the baby. Imagine the child feels very rooted, grounded, held, and grandmama is also there. So there's these 3 generations that are there, if not 4, if a great grandmother or an auntie or someone is also able to be there. That's again, this womanly holding and a feeling of deep nourishment at the earliest phases of our life. This creates different beings. There's an underlying calmness that comes with this. I've shared this with a few of you, I think, before, but I remember last year I was so impacted during, COVID and the pandemic. And I went to the grocery store at some point during all of this, and, everything, the masks and the lines, only a certain number of people are allowed to go in and all the things. And I saw this young woman, she must have been 21, 22, with what looked like a 3-4 day old baby. And she was doing everything on her own, baby and stroller. And she's also trying to get the groceries and everything. And when I saw her, everything about it felt so misaligned, just so deeply misaligned, that baby and the noise and so I asked her, do you need some help? Let's go out to the car, take you out to the car, help. And she just looked at me like, oh, thank God, so depleted. You go through that and then you're going through all of that at the same time. We just had a little chat as well. And it was really, such a symbology for me, just such a revelation for me of the dishonoring that we have and the lack of support and care and the lack of circledom that we create today also for supportive women. So work, even, I know Shalini, you work in women's shelters and work with, some of these challenges and real life things that we see. The more we can also let the echoes of this widen out. Not just for our family or our small unit, but also how we can bring wider impacts of this knowledge, I feel is so important. So that goes from Jess's question. It's a bit peripheral, but really, really these rituals, this stability in the earliest phases of our lives, it creates such a difference in the mid-years. All the trauma, all the attachment styles we talk about now, all those things, much of them are due to this early dysregulation. So honoring the childhood phase is so important. And now a lot of us go, well, I'm not a child anymore, and it was definitely not honored. So now what? Am I just totally screwed up? Right? No, it doesn't mean we can't do things now, but it also means we can bring deep healing for the next generation. Right? None of us have perfect childhoods. And even those of you who are going to do your best as mamas, we do the best that we can, right? There's going to be ways in which we simply, inherit from our parents, and then we learn. This is Satguru through the teaching of life. They've had the karma to be born to you, and you've had the blessed karma also of being their parents. And that's how the movement happens. And in this way, though, we do start to eradicate some of this ancestral karma that's been occurring. This is almost like a counter movement, loves, as I share this now, because now we are completely not in this recognition of cocooning, of density, of kapha, of holding, all those kinds of things. It's such a counterculture to all of that right now. Just even the rapidity, right? The pace at which children are supposed to move is so fast, is so vitiating, so imbalancing. So these daily rituals, just as you asked, there are many that can be done, but all of them in moderation, like with anything, right? So even if we were going to give a little bit of an herb, we also do it in the utmost moderation. So the same with the rituals as well, all of it in moderation. Other questions about the childhood phase? Yes. Who else?
Just a question of if, like, under certain circumstances, it just totally brought back, I think, probably a lot of why I feel the way I do in holding. And if there was a way to go about it, or maybe I have, but I had my first baby was a NICU baby. So he was in there for 30 days.
Yes.
And I always felt that, I guess I couldn't be there enough for him, you know what I mean? Like you weren't allowed to hold him, and you weren't allowed to do certain things. And do you overcome that? Like, do they overcome that as babies? Like, do they know? I don't know how that goes. Like, he's so nurtured now. I feel like I wake up and trying constantly, but I think I hold that real tight, that I didn't get to be there. So I don't know if that's a thing or not. I don't know.
Oh, bless you, Shona. Yeah, but again, we do our best, right? We do our absolute best. And there also has to be this detached recognition that every being comes with their own karma. And there's like a request somehow that they be born in a specific way with their specific conditions and to you, and that everybody has this learned experience, even through the chaos and the difficulty as well, right? So really moving beyond the personal of, it was my misfortune or my fault somehow, or I didn't do the best. Also understanding this little being has his own teachings, in that somehow, right? And then how do I also be a steward of that? Like, I was called to be part of this, to be a participant to it. So absolutely, many of us are born with vitiations. Many of us are born with imbalances because of birth trauma, because of things that have happened. And absolutely, we can work exactly with this, establishing more and more kapha. So how can we bring more of that density, really honor this time of deep creative nourishment on every level, nourishing Brahmana, what we call it, to really nourish him in every way possible. And then, each one of us, we have our imprints, we have our samskaras, we have our vasanas, we have also our mental imprints that are there. But we do our absolute best, especially parents like yourself, to really help that child, that being, and the specific conditions that he's had. So it's not like we don't even want to talk about reversible or not, or because we all do come with things. I mean, it's as honest as that, right? But absolutely, we can really take care to nourish, to hold, to contain that which may have felt very vast and spacious and a bit dispersed in those early phases, right? So how can he feel just constantly held? And for example, Abhyanga is a great one for children who have experienced birth trauma. So doing the body oiling, like warm body oiling, even once a week, saying, okay, it's oil time, come on, and rubbing the oil. It's a great one for them to have their little ritual, to feel also that quality of massage from you. It's a wonderful way for their little nervous systems also to feel really established and held and calmed.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Yeah. Head massage is also, Shiro Abhyanga is also a really wonderful one for kids who deal with anxiety. So doing face and head massage or that might have dealt with birth trauma. And you don't have to be skilled. Like, I need to take a head massage now, an Ayurvedic head massage course. Do you offer that, Tiffany? Just intuitive massage that we give, you know, a little bit of oil and massaging our kids. It's a beautiful way that they can also feel their brain kind of soften and the mind also still. So, but really this detachment also, Shauna, there's something about really, again, recognizing like, yes, it's a little being that was born to me, but also it's a being unto itself. Like this is a being who had his own reasons for coming into the world and life and has his own independent karma. And of course, that can be the most difficult one to come to, right? I've had a lot of parents say to me, all the other things, Tiffany, but not that one. Like, I am so attached. That's my kid. That's mine. Like, I own that being. Like, don't tell me that that's anything but mine. Right? So it can be the most precious and the most attached relationship that exists there, right? Especially for mothers.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Yesterday, someone said to me, you know, it's a very special and specific thing to know that you would die for this being. You would die for them. Like, and he was talking about his son, you know, you would die for a being. Like, that's it. It's like really clear inside your being. That's a very specific commitment in your life. Nobody else but you. Yeah. Okay. And if there's a couple other of you that are also my children, then those ones I would die for. So someone sent to me a very funny little clip from a Ryan Reynolds interview. And he said, you know, oh, I just adore my wife. You know, I don't know. He's a Canadian actor or something. I don't know. Anyways, I just adore my wife. I don't even know who he's married to. Maybe some of you know. And she's just the most beautiful thing. And oh, she's just changed my life, transformed my life. He has this utmost bhakti for his wife, you know. He said, and so I used to say all the time, I would, you know, kill for you. I hope I don't ever have to kill someone, but I would take a bullet for you. I never felt like this about anyone in my life. And then he said, and then my first daughter came. And he said, I literally looked at my wife and said, I would use you for a shield for that baby. Impermanence, how things change. So this is the utmost nourishment, right? We're literally like the cocoon around our children. Okay, let's move to the next phase. Let's explore a little bit the phase that we're all currently in. So the next phase is this adulthood, or what we might call motherhood in the feminine sense. And this is the time of fertility, but I don't want you to think of this just as fertility of having children, but this means great procreation, that the reproductive energy is active within us, because this is from menarche until menopause. So that phase from the time of puberty until the time of menopause is really this phase where we're fertile in various ways, and that this reproductive fertile energy can pour through us and can bring actualization. Now imagine if we haven't taken care of the childhood energy. Where do we draw our vitality from to be able to be fertile? You see, this is when it becomes of the utmost importance. And today in the 50 hour, we talked about ojas, right? So think about during the childhood phase, this is the building of ojas. This is the building of our primal vigor, our vitality. And then we can take that energy and actualize it into fertility. What's it going to bear forth? What will it be given to birth as far as vision, manifestation, ideas, a life, and existence, and maybe also children. But there are various ways in which we bring birth. So this is the energy of pitta, light, sharp, hot, oily, liquid, subtle. So this is the pitta phase of our life, the more fiery phase. And the Vishnu energy, because this is the sustenance of life, needs to occur. And the Jnana Shakti. So this is more where we start to gain experiential knowledge to move in the world with insight and intelligence. So in the Kapha phase, we're acting. Everything is very vital, right? We're tangible with things. In this phase, we're starting to know it. We're starting to deeply know what it is to be in the world. And so in this phase, for us as women, what are some of the potential imbalances we can experience? And a lot of us know this, right? So physically, hormonal fluctuations, because now we're really in that phase where we are moving with the moon. We're in the cycles with the moon more than ever. In childhood and also postmenopausally, we're not subjected to so much changing nature. And I think I shared this with you maybe the first or second evening we were together, but I can't get it out of my heart, and had one of my dear friends who said, I have no problem with any of the emotive states of my wife. When I see all the stuff you guys got to go through, all the changes each month you got to go through, he said to me, I have the utmost bowing reverence. Like, I don't know how you do it, changing and moving and babies and period and all the things that you have. So he said, she's in a mood, I get it. And I thought, this is a beautiful way for a man to approach it. He was like, honestly, Tiffany, it's unbelievable what, the cyclical changes that women have to go through and that they have to kind of roller coaster through. So one of the potential imbalances more during this phase is this constant hormonal fluctuation. Fertility challenges, of course, and that could be fertility on a physiological level, but it could also be fertility of we have challenges also manifesting our visions, right? So we have a fit and start. We might also deal with all the various, so we can think of the various challenges with fertility, everything from literal fertilization to implantation to also birth challenges to spontaneous abortion or miscarriage. That can come in a very physical way, like literally with a child, but this can also happen in the ways in which we try to fertilize with our reproductive energy. So we have ideas, but we can't quite, bring them into tangibility, or we can't implant them in the world, or we have things we start and then they fall away. Right? So you're understanding that this is both subtle and also more gross in a very progeny specific way. So those fertility challenges generally can be there in this more pitta phase of our life. And menstrual imbalances, of course, is one of the main things that as women during this phase physically can be one of our challenges. And then mentally, this is the time with pitta energy when more things like stress and hyperintensity and vigilance can all be challenges. Cages and complexes, what we've talked about, and addictions. So this is more the phase when women will deal with that. The fire of stress and all the things that we have to balance can come out in the full expression of all of our shadows and our cages and our complexes. And either we can learn to be free of them, or we start to really, really solidify them. Burnout, exhaustion, right? Some of you are going, oh yeah, I'm knowing some of these. I've, had a plethora of these going on, right? Because all of us are really in this phase still. So we're in this place of these potential imbalances. So what are some of the things that the Vedas and Ayurveda offer specifically around balancing in this adult, in a woman's adulthood phase? So as far as diet, of course, again, nourishing, whole, fresh, balanced, constant and not limiting. And the reason I wrote this is oftentimes in the pitta phase, we get very controlling with the things we can control. And so what do I see? I see a lot of women in the pitta phase that what we do is rather than have constancy, this is the Vishnu phase, right? Consistency, maintenance, sustenance. We go into fits and starts and we have stress responded eating. So emotional eating, then a diet. Then I'm into this type of eating. Now I'm into that type of eating. Then I'm highly restrictive on this. Now I'm just totally binging on that, right? Does it sound familiar? This kind of oscillation can happen, especially the extremes of pitta. So it can happen during that phase. So one of the most healthful things for an adult woman to start to develop after her 20s or around that age, which will come from the kapha phase also, is constancy in the diet. It's more important that a woman choose some kind of consistent way of eating, even if it isn't the most optimal healthy diet, then she change 50 times over this phase, over these 20, 30 years of her life. Let's say 30 years, because it's more like 30, 35 years of our lives. So having this constancy, we'll notice that our menstruation, our fertility, our menopause will all move with more grace. So women who have, consistent meal times, consistent things that we've been eating throughout our lives. I look to my grandmother. My grandmother comes from a family of, they were 12. There was 12 of them, siblings. And there was only 2 boys of the 12 of them. And these women, many of them, my grandmother has since passed. She dealt with alcoholism, but she even died. She passed at 89 or something. And she has sisters who are still alive, 100, 102. You know, I have these aunts, these great aunts. And they grew up in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton. And in Cape Breton at that time, I mean, they had an outdoor toilet still. The diet, the lifestyle was so constant, so connected to nature. You know, consistent. This is the time we have breakfast. This is when we work. This is when we have output. This is when we have input. We use a lantern at night. We go to bed at this time. I'm not saying it was perfect. I'm not romanticizing it. But there was something about that constancy. That also meant when I used to, you know, ask my mom about my grandma's, you know, menopause, or also about her period, they didn't really have issues. These hormonal fluctuations we see today are often in direct correspondence with how much our lifestyle is fluctuating all the time. So that's inclusive in our diet. How much is it constantly changing and fluctuating and different, bringing more constancy? Craving avoidance. So especially when we start getting really tight and we're always avoiding cravings, we don't give ourselves some leeway. Right? So we get really tight with our diets. Okay, sometimes you have a piece of cake, you know, or you have a little bit of chocolate, but then it's a different thing if you have a whole cake, right? So it depends on how this moves for us. Or you eat all the kids' Halloween candy and tell them that you don't know where it went, right? So it's like finding a balance where we're neither craving avoidant, nor are we totally giving way to cravings. Seasonally and constitutionally aligned. So Ayurveda always highlights this, that we flow with Prakriti, that we find an alignment with the seasons, and also we find out our constitution and we align it to that. This also helps so much in those mid-years of our life. Then for our lifestyle, the things we've already discussed. So having a strong solar and lunar sadhana, like really in this mid-phase of our lives, orienting to the connection with the sun and the moon and these rhythms, having sacred sisterhood. This is a strong period. If we want to be fertile in our lives, we also, in a positive, healthful way, we want to be around other women also that give off this fertile energy. Rest and respite, taking phases of really having deep rest. And sustenance in creativity and manifestation. So not, again, this fit and start kind of yo-yoing, but rather that we sustain our creative and manifestation energy. We take times where we really pour forth, like we were learning with the moon, and we take other times where we hibernate a bit. And then again, ideas or things that we want to offer. And that could be even just in the home, you know, like our cleaning or the things we need to do or the ways in which, you know, we want to have a new phase to how the family is moving. I'm not talking about you have to have some huge passion project, just even the ways in which we fertilize the space around us. We take some time for that, and then we also take time for rest. And in our Aushadhi, which we often think of it as herbal medicine or 5 sense therapy, there are some very simple ones like our daily routine. So cleaning the ama out, some of the toxicity out, and really giving ourselves love daily. And also nature bathing and moon cycling, which we already talked about, is one of the best ways that we can receive medicine. And 2, I would say, you know, I was thinking about some of the herbs that I suggest more than ever to women in this phase are Shatavari and Triphala. Because Shatavari is an excellent one for women unless we have a history of estrogenic cancers in our family and in our maternal line. Shatavari is an excellent one for balancing fertility, hormonal imbalances, pregnancy, postpartum. It's such a gift. It means to have 1,000 husbands. So one who possesses 1,000 husbands. So you can imagine the kind of woman you become when you're taking constant Shatavari, let alone vitamin D. When Shalini was asking about this supplementation. And Triphala is a wonderful one because all the stressors and the pollutants in body and also mind can be cleared with Triphala. So we take a little bit of Triphala, half a teaspoon of Triphala every evening. This is an excellent one to clear out some of the ama, some of the toxicity that enters into a lot of our spaces today, especially the pollutants in our water, in our food, and the space around us. Okay, let me stop there and see if there's any questions about this phase, about this mid phase of our lives, women, which we are most, you know, we're all in this phase now, including the ones on video as well. Anything that's there, wonderings or sharings.
Thank you so much, Tiffany, for this. It's Shalini here. A question around the imbalances in the womanhood timeline is around fertility. And, you speak of fertility challenges. I'm going to take it back to actual physical fertility challenges where women have experienced loss or miscarriages. How does a woman, because the unfortunate part is that the world, whether, I don't know how the Indian tradition is, but especially in the Western world, when there is no child, then there is no postnatal care.
Yes.
And it goes hand in hand. And oftentimes the woman gets pushed off to the side. But how does a woman come back into balance, especially cyclically with the moon, with her menstruation cycle? If a woman's gone through loss, say such as stillbirth or whatnot, then she's actually producing milk. There's a lot of other issues that are happening within the woman's body where it may think she's going through this phase of postnatal, of having postpartum, but there's no child. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on that a little bit.
Yes, bless you, Shalini, for sharing this also. So again, exactly as you shared it as well, this honoring, the honoring of these various experiences, true, and some of them filled with tumult and great pain, right? That we go through as men, as women, as beings on this planet. The honoring of that in the culture of rapidity, there's just not enough space. So we don't give enough space for anything. We don't give space for women to have a menstrual day, for example. And we don't give space even when a woman does birth a child, we get them as quickly as possible out of the hospital and back home now, right? They're not even given space to stay in the hospital for very long. Many of us don't want to either, but that space isn't there. So then when we talk further about women who have gone through miscarriage or stillbirth and the kind of gray area of that, or at least as it's seen as gray more in this Western culture and world, because we're so object oriented, there's a baby or there's not. And the subtle realms, the less material realms, are not given as much attention. We don't live there. We live so much in the vital now, in this physicality. So in the Ayurvedic and the Vedic tradition, there's much more recognition and reverence for all these spaces in between and the subtle spaces also. And we all know this inherently, and all of you are on this time together and in this immersion and in this circle together because you have this intuition and also connection to this. So what I find very beautiful in the Ayurvedic tradition is that there is always what we could think of almost as 5 mesters, like kint mesters to childbirth. There's the time of preconception. There's 3 trimesters of pregnancy if we come to full term. And then there's also the post-birth, so the postnatal care as well. And that all of those phases are given real specific intentionality. And so similarly, if a woman has gone through a stillbirth and also the child has left the body quicker than we imagined, that too deserves its own holding space. That too deserves its own recognition as an experience and a part of life. And so postnatal care would be similar. This 40 days that I mentioned before, how many women do you know who give themselves that opportunity? Or even know that they can give themselves that opportunity, right? Let alone you have the baby and then you get in the car. How quickly? That's so vata vitiating for so many of us. We get in a car, we move way too quickly through space. The baby is moving quickly through space. They just came out of, they came through a major channel and now they have to get in a car seat and this whole thing and go home, in whatever way. Maybe we live close enough to the hospital, we can walk with the stroller, but I doubt it, right? So how many actually have that experience? So to have a child at home and really to have those 48 days or to have that period of time, or even if we arrive home, this is such a rarity. So when Shalini asked this question also, I feel it would be just as important, if not more so, and in the Ayurvedic tradition, there is also a highlight upon psychological talk therapy, that whenever we go through grief, it's not denied, but there's a nourishment, because when we have a child, we're full while we're pregnant. And then what happens? And this is postpartum, and why a lot of women experience also postpartum depression, especially if they have more vata in their constitution. When that child leaves the physicality, whether that child is here to stay for some time or they pass through their bodily experience very quickly, so they have this passing quite quickly. Either way, the relationship is such that we were full and now we're empty. So we've gone from extreme kapha to extreme vata. There's literally this big wide open space, right? The whole vaginal canal has become a big wide open space. The womb was a big wide open space. The uterus, this whole area became wide. Either way, when Shalini's asking this, it's a really important one. So there's no difference in that way, actually, of that experience, that there was fullness and now there's emptiness. Similarly, hormonally, there's fullness. And now, for the sake of childbirth, whether, again, the child stays in form or doesn't, there has to be also this dropping away hormonally of those filling hormones like estrogen, progesterone, which help us to feel really full. And so with that drop, a lot of women experience with vata vitiation, with a vata imbalance and this great vastness, they experience a feeling of emptiness, of loss, of loneliness, because that fullness is no longer here. And finally, we have some recognition of postpartum depression, right? We have some recognition of this, but in the Ayurvedic tradition, that's why we do things like massaging and holding and binding and togetherness and cocooning, and the room and everything that's done is about maintaining this kapha, actually, in that earliest phase, because otherwise it creates so much dispersion that we can really feel this vata. So when you ask this question, Shalini, it's really about vata pacification. So of course, the body is feeling like it's out in space. It doesn't find its ground. It's not quite sure what just happened. And then the grief also of this. And this can be, again, whether or not we've birthed a child who stayed in form or hasn't. In both ways, it can be a feeling of also somehow losing the wholeness, the togetherness, the fullness. And then it's further amplified with what you've shared. I, of course, haven't experienced this, or I shouldn't say of course, but I haven't experienced this, a stillbirth. And I can only imagine the impact of the loss that comes with that. This is an ultimate vata grief, a vata vitiation that comes with that. So everything we can do to pacify, to ground, to hold, to be held, to be cocooned, to hold the loss, to hold ourselves. Even belly binding is something that has become a lost art, but they had in many, many traditions, not just in Ayurveda, to bind the whole space, actually, to wrap it in warmth, to put abhyanga oil, to put warm oil on the whole space of the abdomen, and then to bind with a nice cloth or with a scarf, with a dupatta. But you see, we don't do any of these things a lot of the time anymore. This, again, it helps where there was, all this expansion and now it hasn't found its contraction again. It helps to remind us we're coming back to center. You're not just going to be vastly left open in this way. So I hope this helps us, all of us, understand, because some of you all have birthed, not all of us have, but helps us understand why. And a lot of women are very confused, especially when they have had a healthy child. They're very confused as to, why do I feel sad? Why do I feel empty? My life's supposed to be so full. I have this fullness, whatever it might be. And then further, when you're sharing this also, Shalini, about stillbirth, and then when the body's attempting to do other things that obviously are in discordance, like lactation. This is a real vata vitiation. Everything is up in the air, right? It's not quite grounded and contained. So does this help? Is this at all?
It does. It does help. It doesn't help, though, knowing that the world that we live in, especially in the Western part of the world, does not honor this. I mean, when it did happen to me, I was at work in 16 weeks and I had a C-section. And that was not honored.
Yes. Yes.
So it's traumatic on all levels, physically, spiritually, mentally, and then back at work, and my work is quite physical, so I was back doing that. So there actually it's been 4 years, but there has not been one moment of stillness.
Yes. Bless you for sharing with us also in such vulnerability as well, Shalini. I also honor your experience. It has much to teach us. It often feels like this tornness in me to say that I'm sorry for our experiences, because on some level, I also see them as guidances that each one of us, for whatever reason, has been called to. But of course, I'm sorry for the pain that this might have stirred, in you. And at the same time, I feel your strength and your power and what you teach us also in sharing this. And so what you say that doesn't help about our recognition in the current culture that we live in, well, my hope is that we have conversations like this, we have dialogues like this, and it does have an echo. It does have an impact. We have more honoring of the women around us. We're more resourced in the way in which we might contain and hold. We might offer a khichdi diet to our next door neighbor who we know has gone through a miscarriage. We say, you know what? Let me, for the next week, feed you. There, this has already made an impact. Hey, I heard about this thing, belly binding. I bought you a belly binder, and I also bought you this Vata Abhyanga oil. Let me show you how you might do this. Let me hold you in your grief. I recognize your grief and see that, there's been great loss and the emptying, the loss of something, the impermanence. So absolutely, but this is a counterculture. I mean, when we're really coming to Ayurveda and we're coming to this ancient wisdom, it isn't, there is a bit of a swimming upstream right now, because the flow, well, the counter flow, but the flow that's really happening in the popular culture is one that's so contrary to our natural wisdom of our hearts and also of our bodies, right? Of how we would move with other women and in this way. So yes, and there's more countries that are honoring these period days, these moon days as well. Whoever imagined that? So we continue to work with these things and see, maybe 30 years from now, our daughters will be telling us that, they have period day every month, that they get to, whatever it might be. But yes, thank you for sharing your experience, Shalini.
You're welcome. I would say that the experience, after I moved through the first stages, the initial stages of grief, and you never stop grieving, that's one thing, but it looks different at different stages in your life. But what it did teach me, and I do feel that in trauma there are lessons to be learned as well, is that understanding the cycle of life. I understood death to a point where I just never understood it before.
Yes. 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 Thank you, Sean. Okay, loves, let's just take a few more minutes to go through the last phase. Okay, this elderhood phase, the sagehood phase. So this is from menopause until, as Shalini was mentioning now also, until our point of impermanence also, to death. So this is the phase of detachment in sagehood. And this is presided over by the Vata energy more. So light, cold, dry, rough, mobile, subtle, and clear are the qualities of this phase of our life. This is also the god Shiva of destruction and assimilation. So things are falling away at this phase. The family that we might have once built, it's looking different. The friends that might have surrounded us, they start to fall away. Our job, our employment, retirement, the things that might come with that. The hobbies or the ways we used to be able to use our body, it falls away. Can we be okay with some of the falling away that happens, the emptying out that happens? And this is Icha Shakti. We start to really align to the deep will of the divine to allow the fullness of Shakti to reign. What's the will, the final will of my life? The total will of what Shakti is asking for this life. And in these years, this Vata phase of life, our elderhood, our sagehood, what are some of the potential imbalances as women? And this may be a phase we're coming to, but this might also be for our mamas, for our grandmas. So this is an important one because, again, we can share this with all women and the women who have come before us. So physically with Vata, what we can get is this phase, especially, is depletion. So bones, libido, skin, right? So depletion. So we really want to work with, and we're going to look at that with balancing. We want to work to really bring the opposite to depletion. And menopausal challenges, right? How many of us have heard from the women ahead of us, from our foremothers, about menopausal challenges. And that's why taking care of this phase of our lives is so essential. Women, if we find more balance now, you're going to notice that there will be a gracious move through menopause. It's really about the 10, 15 years before menopause that really impacts how menopause then is moved through as well. So this is really, really crucial. If we get more constancy, if we work with more stress reduction, all of these things, you'll notice that your menopause will also be more and more easeful. And then mentally, loss and depletion also, erratic and fluctuating, ungrounded and lonely. These are the potential imbalances with the Vata phase of our life. And so how can we help to bring balance? In our diet, we want a diet, especially in our elderhood years, that's grounding and stable and pacifying. So this is not the phase of life to be eating raw food, smoothies, light foods, grazing. It's the time of life to really be having denser food, although moderate portions. So, you know, a good oatmeal for breakfast, having for lunch a good, stable, warming meal, whatever that might be. And for dinner, having a nice, you know, kind of pureed soup, something that's easy to digest, but also has stability, warmth, and it might have some unctuousness. It might have some creaminess, some oils to it. Again, these qualities of grounding and stable. When I see older women who really get turned on by, juice fasts and raw foods, and I get really concerned, because this is the energy we don't want to be giving during that phase. We want to have creamy and heavy and warm and stabilizing foods as much as possible. And we really want to make sure that we still have regularity and consistency, but moderate. Our digestion being more Vata, having more air and ether, it's not as lubricated. So we need moderate meals, but we really don't want to skip meals. So this is a tendency that can happen in the Vata phase of life as well. Just skipping meals, not eating as much, eating very, very little. So again, it's really important to maintain our meals and have consistent meals. And having simplicity. So bringing simplicity to our diet, not missing meals, as I said, and not fasting. This is not the phase of life to fast. Doing prolonging fasts. Now, some women have more what we could call spiritual fasts. Okay. One day it's Mahashivaratri or these other, phases, but we even see for children and also for the elderly in the Vedic tradition, during those days, it'll be said, okay, have some fruits, have some poha, have some flattened rice, have some of these things, because we shouldn't be totally fasting during that phase. For the adulthood phase, okay, but for this phase, not as much. In our lifestyle, the lifestyle at this period, it's not the time to keep working. So like I said before, we try to extend that pitta phase of life, both into childhood and also into elderhood, right? Like we never want to die. So we tell ourselves, oh, no, I'm not aging. I don't need to retire. I don't want to take a break. And then we burn ourselves into the ground, like we say, right? This expression that we use. So it's the time to have gentle, joyful, celebrating lifestyle. To be more sharing and connecting and mentoring. It's like there's these beautiful projects now, I don't know if any of you have seen them, of retirement homes that also have kindergartens in them or preschools in them. It's like this beautiful relationship between these nursing homes, intergenerationality, and the kindergartens. They have this more in Europe, actually. It's beautiful, right? That collaboration, that connection. So sharing, connecting, mentoring. This is such an important phase that we listen. We also listen to our elders so that they have an opportunity to share their will, to share their Icha Shakti, that we give spaces for them to share Icha Shakti, to really offer all of their gained wisdom in this life. And wisdom holding, it's the phase where really we give space for wisdom holders. And I would really, request each one of us to think of, who do we have in our life that we really see as a mentor and an elder? Do we even have that vision anymore? Like, how do we even look at our own parents? Do we see our parents as elders or wisdom holders in any way, or grandparents? How do we see that? And if we don't have that relationship with any elder in our life, to seek it out. and to honor an elder in our life, to see the sage wisdom that comes through. This is an important part of, again, recreating a new world in which there's more of this collective field, more of this honoring, especially of women who have moved through all of it. I've learned so much over the years from hearing from women who have moved past menopause, through menopause, and into this later phase of life with grace. So really learning about their movements. And then Aushadhi, so 5 sense therapy, herbal medicine, connecting with nature. Daily routine needs to be nourishing and grounding. So for example, not getting up too early. Maybe this isn't the phase anymore of life. Making sure that we have Abhyanga. Abhyanga is a great one. All of our oiling. It's like every orifice. You know, my more elderly patients, they just say, I just keep on putting the oil, Tiffany, it's working. Oil in my joints, oil in my ears. I can hear better now, just oil everywhere. I'm like an oil factory, right? So just oil, giving everywhere oil. Oil in my diet. You told me take the ghee, take the oil. Okay, just oil everywhere. I have this one woman, she's like, now my husband, also the oil. He's like, where's our oil? So starting the day with oil, incorporating oils in the diet, really nourishing and grounding as much as possible. And that can include the yoga practice, you know, very restorative yoga, gentle things that are deeply nourishing in our daily routine. You think of it, aquafit and swimming, again, nourishing, grounding activities, you know, these things that keep us grounded. Gentle nature bathing. So not overexposure, but gentle nature bathing, and menopausal care. So there's a lot of different things that we use for menopausal care. It really depends on each woman, and it depends on the woman's constitution of what we do with menopausal care. So we'll have to look at that separately. But this is a phase where, especially, you know, depending on if a woman is dealing with more heated menopausal symptoms or if she's dealing with more depletive mental and physiological conditions, there's different herbs, different things that are suggested for each woman. Dependent upon this, but especially in Ayurveda, this is more of the focus of that time. How do we care for menopause? I mean, there are so many symptoms that I hear today of menopause. You know, it's very rare, women, that I hear of a woman who doesn't have anything, that really just moves through the phase with grace. And again, this time and this period of our lives is what will really prevent having all of the various things that can come. You know, the night sweats and the hot flashes and insomnia. And I don't want to give the list because then it's a placebo. We're all like, oh my God, what 10 things will I get, right? So when you take care now, usually what happens is menopause will be an expression of your Vikruti. So if you have a Pitta imbalance, if you have a Vata imbalance, a Kapha imbalance, that's how menopause, just like menstruation, will express itself. So a Pitta menopause means all the heat and fiery things, both physically and emotionally. A Vata menopause means all the light and more empty and dispersed kind of things. And a Kapha menopause means the more heavy weight gain, sad, depressive kinds of things. So when we take care of balancing ourselves now, then we notice that really that's the greatest menopausal care that we can give ourselves. And especially when we take care of the nature bathing and a daily routine, this really helps as far as the medicine at that time. Questions, things that come up about this phase, about sagehood, elderhood, anything that's there for many of you that might be arising. And I hope it gives us all some also honoring of the women around us and also of this phase to come. Okay, so our integrations for this upcoming week. The first one, owning our life cycle phase. So really thinking about, okay, we're in this Pitta phase of life. What does that look like? You know, what are some of the things that I can do? And that's the next one, 2, commit to one balancing integration during this phase. So what's one thing I could do to balance more during this phase? And then connecting to one other woman, a new woman, maybe someone who's been there in your life, but bringing deep into connection to a woman who's in a different phase. So either a woman who's more in that sagehood phase, or a young woman who's more in her phase, the childhood phase, the growth and creativity phase. Fostering connectedness, learning something, being in that understanding. And when I say owning your life cycle phase, really getting, and we're all really in that Pitta phase, really getting clear about this is the phase that I'm in. So how am I either really participating in it or how have I been denying it? What does it mean to be in this phase? Am I overdoing it? Am I underdoing it? Am I honoring what this phase is about in my life cycle? So any further things that are there, any questions or risings? Anything that's coming up? Okay, then let's have a final sharing. Just 3 words of how you're feeling right now. Let's just move through our circle and we can just really share what's here for us now, how we're feeling in this very moment. I'm just going to move through you as you're on my screen. So Shauna, let's start with you. You can come on off mute and each one of us can share.
3 words. I'm not sure at the moment, to be honest with you. I just, I feel honestly a little bit more at peace, I guess, with where I'm at. I think I have a ways to go. That's not 3 words, but peace would be one. I do want to say to Shalani, if I said that correctly, I'm sorry. I feel an understanding with you, so understanding, and just connected. I guess this is helping. Helping me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord. Jessica?
I'm really grateful. A lot of gratitude right now for you and for all the women on the call. I spent the weekend. I have 2 half sisters on the island. They're 13 and 16, and just with so much from what you're sharing, I just feeling so many ways of things that I could share. So just this great gratitude for that, and yeah, also connecting.
Thank you, Jess. Oh, what an opportunity to have these young sisters also. Abby?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, just feeling really grounded, like very grounded, and feel good about where I'm at, I guess. It's like an invitation to just accept myself and feel good right now. And I'm also excited to just sort of bring some of this stuff into, like, with my children. I have 3 boys. So, and I really feel the oiling part, like connecting with them in that way. Because I also had a bit of a traumatic experience with the twins. They were premature and we had the NICU experience too. So that definitely carries through in a lot of ways. So yeah, so I'm excited to try some of that. Yeah, I'm just grateful.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Abby. Shalini?
Just full of gratitude for everybody for sharing all their experiences. I feel very overwhelmed just by knowing that we are holding each other together, not in a negative way, but just like really happy. And like we were talking about maidenhood, and I was just like, my curiosity was like here, like, oh yeah, and then like transitioning into the phase, like what I am in, and I'm like, I don't know, like I'm still feeling myself in the curiosity phase, and it's just like very interesting for me to. And when you said the homework, and I'm like, oh yes, the homework. So yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shalini. And Shalini?
Okay. I might have more than 3.
Yes, I think we all do.
I'll start with my 3. Truth, what I'm sitting in. Love and wisdom. The wisdom, I think, is a big one because of the loss of it throughout the many centuries, and transitioning or cycling back to the wisdom. I've been searching for this type of community for a long time. I just told my dad this morning that I don't feel like I belong here anymore. I just want to go back to India. And I just need to be around this. And, we had a long discussion about what does that mean for someone who's been born and brought up in the Western part of the world. And it was a really intelligent and interesting conversation with my father, who grew up there but said he's been here for 40 years and also can't go back, or it doesn't feel like he can balance himself out there. But it's that yearning of the wisdom that I received in this, but also a disconnect from the nature, being here and wanting to go back home, even though that's never been my home, but it still feels like home. And then the fourth word I'll use to describe is a sense of relief and release.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone sharing. I feel right now a sense of tenderness and simplicity, and just this great sense of weaving, somehow weaving a tapestry together. And I also feel this, circle them, even though there's this implicit invitation for me to somehow hold the space here, I also feel this collaboration, just all of us coming together. And that's really nourishing. It's just deeply nourishing that we sit together in this way. I find a simplicity, and I also find my own vulnerability here with you as well. So something in that is really, really different and nourishing, I have to say, in the intimacy of this group. So thank you for that. I feel very grateful to be here together. Okay, let's have a beautiful week of contemplation and these gifts of the Vedas and how they move into our lives now, right? Like we're in 2022, so how they find their integration now. And let's come for just one last moment to close the eyes, and we'll chant together. So let yourself come onto mute and let your eyes close. Settle and allow there to be quietude. And you can come to repeat after me, beautiful Purnamada mantra, this mantra of wholeness. So allow the hands to settle into the heart and repeating after me. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May this recognition of what it is to live in and through this human life cycle, and also the feminine embodiment of the human life cycle, as we come to know this more deeply in the experience of our lives, may it allow each phase to be more liberated, experienced with less suffering, and more wholeness and wellness, so we can truly live from our greatest freedom, so we can impact also this planet, this earth at this time with great joy and truth and beauty. May it be so. Om. Namaste. Thank you, beloveds. If you want to come off mute, and we'll see each other again next Wednesday. Yes, we'll see each other next week. Good night.
Bye. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.